Good morning, grades 7 and 8. Welcome back to the school year. This video is designed to teach you a little bit about the first unit of inquiry that you're going to be looking at this year, and it's a multidisciplinary unit. Before we talk about how you're going to be assessed, what you're going to be learning about, and how you're going to work with each of your subject area teachers, let's take a look at this picture prompt and just do some pre-thinking. You may have seen this picture before. Some people think that this is the most important and iconic photograph ever taken. The name of this photograph is Earthrise. I've given you a couple links to articles that will tell you more of the background of this picture here, but briefly what I can tell you is that this was taken in 1968 aboard Apollo 8, which was a mission about a year before Neil Armstrong landed on the moon, and the job of the Apollo 8 mission was to take photographs of the surface of the moon and look for a good place for the later Apollo missions to land. One of the astronauts on that mission decided to shift the perspective of his camera, and rather than take photographs of the surface of the moon, he pointed his camera back towards the Earth, and as the capsule was coming around the backside of the moon, he captured this photograph of the Earth rising over the horizon of the moon. Now, this was a totally new way that people were looking at the Earth. Of course, nobody had ever been to the moon before, and this was an entirely new perspective. And because of this new perspective, and when people saw this photograph that had never been seen before, it shaped people's thinking because they were seeing things in a way that they never had before. I'll give you an example. Some people think that this photograph is the birth of the modern environmental movement, and there were many people who looked at this photograph and realized that when you see the planet Earth kind of floating very small against the vastness and darkness of space, you realize that this is the home that we have, and we need to take better care of it. Other people looked at this and they noticed that when you look at the planet Earth like this, it seems very small, and you imagine everybody living on this one small little place in the universe. You notice that there are no outlines or borders, and some people started to think more in a political sense, that maybe we should do a better job of not fighting with each other as people, and learn to get along better. So based on these new perspectives, people were able to apply that different perspective to a couple different contexts, in this case politics and the environment, and they were able to sort of think about things in a new way. And that's what we're going to ask you to do for this unit. So the statement of inquiry for this unit is that context and point of view change perspective. And we're going to ask you to think about your context and your point of view, and then we're going to ask you to think about and reflect upon your perspective. As we think about this statement of inquiry, the word that should jump out of you, the verb in this sentence, the operative word, is change. And that is our key concept. So for this unit of inquiry, the key concept that we are going to look at is the concept of change. And we're going to ask ourselves some questions about change. Questions like, why does change happen? How does it happen? What are the effects of change when it does happen? And we're going to ask ourselves whether we can measure or we can quantify change. We're also going to consider context and point of view. Now, in the Earthrise photograph, I gave you the example of the environment and politics as a couple different contexts in which to think about that photograph. We're going to ask you to think about the context of the concept of change in the contexts of health, education, and travel and movement. So these are the issues that you're going to think about this concept of change, the framework you're going to be working within. And you'll have a choice. You can choose any one of those issues. But I think if you understand that you are going to be thinking about the concept of change with respect to health or education or travel and movement, you can probably already think just in the last 6 months that certainly we have seen lots of change in each of those areas. We're also going to ask you to consider a perspective, and that perspective could be an individual perspective. It could be from the perspective of your family. It could be, sort of a bigger perspective of your school community, or you could even go larger and think about the local, national, or global perspective in terms of change and one of these contexts that you're going to look at. So what does multidisciplinary mean? Well, this means that we can look at things in different ways. And you know already that different academic subjects emphasize sometimes different skills and different ways of thinking about things. What we're going to ask you to do is to think about this key concept, to think about the context that you choose, and to think about your perspective. And we're going to ask you to think about each of those in slightly different ways. So all of your subject area teachers will be working with you on one project and one inquiry. So you'll be considering this issue that you choose, and you will be thinking about it and using the skills you learn from individuals and societies, from English language and literature, from Arabic language and literature, from math, and from science. And all of those skills will come together to help you develop and communicate your understanding. And when you do that, when you work across academic disciplines and you start to see connections, you gain a much deeper understanding. And that's what we're going to ask you to do. Your product, what are you going to be making here? You're going to be producing something. So we're going to ask you to create a research question based on your concept and your context. We're going to ask you to conduct some research. We're going to ask you to learn something. And then we're going to ask you to tell us about it. And you have a couple different choices, three different choices about how you can communicate your understanding. You can do that using an opinion or an editorial, an op-ed, sort of a written piece. You could create a podcast or an audio recording, or you could create some sort of video presentation. So you'd have choices not only in what you choose to study, but you also have choice in how you want to present what you have learned. So as we finish here, there are some things that you should start thinking about now. You should start thinking about what context might you be interested in. Is it travel and movement? Is it health? Is it education? You might think about your perspective on those issues, and you might think about how change in one of those areas has impacted you. You might start thinking about how you're going to learn about this. What sorts of questions are you going to ask? Where are you going to find answers to your questions? And you might start thinking about how you think you want to communicate what you have learned. Each of your academic subjects will be working with you on this project, and so I would hope that you would save the link to this recording. If at any point you find yourself wondering, why am I doing this? I don't understand. I want you to come back and think about this, because all of the things that you are doing are connected here. So you should have a very clear understanding that you might be working on this in slightly different ways and coming at it from different perspectives, but ultimately, whether it's Arabic or English, math, science, or INS, you're working towards the same end product. All right, thank you, and we wish you best of luck, and we're really looking forward to working with you on this. Good luck.